It was an early morning at Canton High School. Shooting Star was standing by his locker with his friend Flash. They were just talking about some random things when the speaker was going on. There was Principal Celestia announcing that every student was going to gym hall for an announcement. Both Shooting Star and Flash were used to looking at each other and wondering what this could be about. But as they all has been told to go to the gym hall by Vice Principal Luna, who was walking by in the hallway to make sure that every student went to the gym hall. And in the gym hall, both Flash and Shooting Star sit next to each other and was waiting for this announcement to be. Even they heard a lot of students talking about what it is going to be about. Maybe some events going to happen, or maybe something else. But sure enough, eventually they would find out when Principal Celestia walked in front of every student. She informed them that the school is going to have their annual science fair within a week. And this year they will have a little bit different. They will be assigned to a partner to this science fair. Usually they would have chosen their own, but this year both Vice Principal Luna and Principal Celestia had decided to make a difference design, to make that they would have been chosen a partner rather than chosen themselves. So they will have their chosen partner by the end of the day when they're in their last class, when the teacher will hand out a note of who they will be assigned as a partner for the science fair. Even though everyone were actually a bit curious to exactly know who they will end up with. Even though that science were probably not most of the students' strongest subject, but at least some of them were at least going to be happy to be part of it. Including that when Shooting Star realized that this particular science fair event is something that Twilight Sparkle would love to do. After all, she's very much a science nerd, or at least a science genius, as most would have said. So after the announcement, they were allowed to go back to their first class, and even during the rest of the class, though, or rest of the day until lunch break, every student was curious who would they end up to be as partner with. Even the Shooting Star was curious to know who he would end up with. He thought maybe that he could end up to be with Flash or maybe some other of his friends. But he wasn't even sure. And he even had asked Flash who he thought maybe he could be his partner for the science fair. And he wasn't even sure himself, since science wasn't his strongest part of the school though, but he said that as long as he end up with someone who is knowledgeable in science, or at least some particular science per project, and even they remember that even Celestia had even mentioned that they will be allowed to choose their own type of science project for the science fair this year. And even though that even Flash had no idea what type of science project that he would even do, but Shooting Star suggests that he should probably wait to choose a science project until he knows who his partner is. So at least both him and his partner can decide from together rather than have to be argued from between each other their own ideas. Flash told that stuff from that. But even though he said he hoped that maybe to end up with Sunset, who were in fact his girlfriend at this point. Even though that Shooting Star laughed and said, well, if you end up with your own girlfriend, that would have been amazing, though. And even though after school was almost over, everyone had their own class, the last class, when the teacher handed over a piece of paper to every student in Shooting Star's class. There was assigned with who was going to be assigned to first as partner. Shooting Star looked at his paper and was expecting maybe Flash or maybe Rainbow Dash or maybe Applejack, which was very good friends of him. But he was surprised that he would end up to be with Twilight. And she wasn't in the class, but he would decide to ask her after school was over to maybe see if they could go to her place and talk about what type of science project they would probably do. So Even after school was over, Shooting Star was waiting outside school for Twilight. Even when he saw that he was walking out with Sunset, Flash, and even Rarity, he waved at her and asked if they could talk. And she nodded and said goodbye to her friends. And I see we are partners for this science fair. Yeah, turns out we are, said Twilight with a smile. So I know you're being often called as science genius, and I don't know exactly what type of project we'd had in mind, but do you have any ideas or suggestions what we can do? I mean, the science fair is in the front from the until that's next week, so we have at least some time to figure out what to do. Yeah, that's true, says Twilight, but I can't figure out exactly for what right now. But maybe if you came over to buy to my place tomorrow after school, we can probably figure out something. That sounds a good idea, said Shooting Star, and both said goodbye. But even by the next day in school, everyone now knows exactly who they'd end up with. Even Shooting Star was curious who Flash ended up to be with. He said, "So, Flash, did you end up with Sunset anyways?" No, not this time. I actually end up with, not believe it or not, but with Applejack. Applejack? Oh, that's unexpected. Who would you end up with? Well, not believe it or not, but with Twilight actually. Mad surprise. I mean, she is a genius. So, have you two ended up decided for what kind of project we have been thought of? No, we haven't, but we are going to decide this after school, said Shooting Star. Okay, sounds reasonable. So even the rest of the class, though, or the school day, Shooting Star was curious exactly what type of project that he and Twilight would end up with doing. But knowing that she is quite skilled in science and even as a called science genius, so he wasn't even worried if they wanted to go get an A or a B for the science project. But after school was over, he was waiting by his car for Twilight, and she showed up, and they went over to her place, and they went to her room, and they started talking about the potential ideas they had. But none of the ideas they talked about didn't seem to be, well, eventually they didn't decide for which, none of them actually. But as they were just sitting there in silence, Shooting Star just looked around in her room and thought maybe that he could find some inspiration in her room. After all, she is very much skilled and very knowledgeable science, and she had worked hard with a lot of science fairs back in Crystal Prep Academy. So why wouldn't she have some inspiration in her place here? Then he noticed that in one of her rooms she had a small model of the solar system. And even though that this is probably something many would probably build, some just a smaller, simple model of the solar system. But when he asked Twilight, I know that many probably will build something about the solar system, but what if we do the same, but we take that the step of a more quite more different than unusual way, rather than building from by paper or something like that. Well, what did you have in mind? Um, I don't know. Maybe something on a screen or something like that. Yeah, that could work, but I'm not sure if we had time for that. Hmm, wait. How about if we do a a hologram of the solar system on a display? Now that does sound a very interesting idea, but I'm not so certain of if that can actually work though. But I mean, Twilight, you are a technical genius. You're a technical genius, science genius. So why wouldn't there be a way for us to maybe make a small hologram representation of the solar system? Hmm. Well, I don't have the things here at home, but I do have my small place there, my small private lab. Maybe we can go there and try to figure out build something. I mean, I may sure have something that we can use for that part of the project, though. Yeah, let's do that. So they actually left her home and went to a small place that she owned, or at least rented. and that place had almost anything that they could need. A lot of wires, cables, a lot of science things that they could probably need. But they didn't exactly know how big this display would be, but they made some schematics, some sort of roughly schematics of how this thing could look like, or maybe something. And of course, they had no idea what to do because when he asked her if she had ever done anything with holograms before, Twilight said that she hasn't. Not even in Crystal Prep Academy when she even thought about doing any holograms. So this was something that for Twilight is a whole new area of science that she hasn't even thought of doing. So even deep in his mind, Shooting Star believed maybe this wasn't a good idea anyways, because he wasn't even sure if this hologram would even be professional or an amateur or even worse. But one of the ways, one of the shows that he had, since they both had chosen to do a hologram or at least a part of the soul system. So they spend the next few days to try to figure out exactly some sort of model how the projector to work. After all, they had to scan, or at least they Twilight scanned a picture from a book of a solar system, how it looks like. So she had at least that part taken care of. And even though when they supposed, like, when Shooting Star said, well, what about if we could somehow make the planets slowly move as the real in real life? I mean, having just a hologram of just a still image of the solar system might sound an interesting, impressive. But if we could put them maybe a little bit further, if we could somehow make them move around the sun, that would impress more to both Celestia and Vice Prince Luna. Twilight nodded that do sounds a very good idea, but it would take some time to get used to figure out exactly how. And since Shooting Star had no technical skills or anything like an experience to do so, but he would do his best. And after a while, though, after almost several days of working out to make some rough disguise, the designs of the projector, and eventually they made a first time a prototype of this, at least a projector. And as they turned it on, it showed the solar system as a still picture, and both just smiled and thought, at least we made this one. And even Twilight was quite impressed of her handiwork this time. She wasn't even sure if this project would even turn out this perfect, or it is this good. But still a small step away from making to make the planets move. So Twilight used her laptop, who was connected to this projector, type on it and try to see if she could somehow start a program to make them move, the planets to move around the star or around the sun. At first, it didn't even work. So she was a bit frustrated, but she tried some another typing on a different other type of code, and still didn't work. So after about almost 2 hours of been trying, there were still no movements on the picture on it in the hologram. So they decided to take a break from it and keep trying to continue the next day. But unfortunately, Shooting Star couldn't come over that day because he had to take some other parts at home. So Twilight had to take care of that problem herself, which he was confident enough that she would take care of that. And sure enough, that same day, she put in a different code and still no work. But after two more codes of trying though, on the third attempt, she finally made it appear that the planets were moving around the sun as normally. She was so excited. She wanted to show this to Shooting Star almost immediately. So she called him and asked if she can come over or maybe if he can come over. She had finally made it work. Shooting Star said that he can come over within a half hour since he had to take care of some things at home first, and she agreed. So another half hour. Shooting Star came over and Twilight put the enter onto her laptop and screen, or at least the hologram was at first still when he came over. But when she put the enter to start, the planets slowly started to move around the sun. I am impressed, Twilight. I knew you would probably figure out how to make it work. Thanks. So, do you think we need any more figure out, or maybe some more work on it? Well, it's up to you. Do you think this hologram is complete, or do you think we need some more touch on it? No, I don't believe that it's completely safe, completely done. Okay, that's settled then. Let us complete and save this for the science fair on by next week. I'm excited, but I have to ask though, what do you think we will get? Probably an A plus. I mean, this is a unexpected surprise or type of project that almost any other students at school had have done before. But but even though I know there's some may do another their representation of the solar system, but not as R though. But even if we will get a B or C plus, I'm still happy to get at least some good grades from it. Twilight agreed, and the both shook hand and Shooting Star left. And even though that the science fair wasn't appeared by the next week, both were actually not so much nervous. They both knew how this project will end up being good. After all, after all, Twilight and Shooting Star put so much work in it, and after finally cracked the code to make it appear working, even though the Twilight did some only about some few days before the supposed science fair, she only did some more retesting to see if this actually continued, if there was any error would appear. But so far, there was no problem at all. And when science fair do would arrive, both Shooting Star and Twilight was really so curious to see what others had been doing. Sure, some made some baking soda volcano, some made actually some about speed or any other scientific projects. Of course, there were some who made a a model of the solar system. But when Twilight's friends came over to their table to ask, "So, what type of project did you do?" "Oh, you will see. You will see. Can you just give them a hint?" said Sunset. "No, we can't," said Shooting Star. "This is a big surprise. We'll all will see when the judges will be around." Even though that most when Celestia, Principal Celestia and Vice Principal Luna were the judges to determine which of these projects will win and receive a good grade. Even though all the other students who actually hasn't been have been watched yet or been observed, some of them actually walked by and even saw their table wasn't even shown any much things as a laptop and a small round disc, or at least a small projector. They were even curious exactly what to know what it could be, but was given the same answer as the others. They all had to wait and see how it will turn out. But when but when it was their turn, both Vice Principal Luna and Principal Celestia walked up to the table and asked, "So, let's see what you have for us for the project." Both Shooting Star and Twilight looked at each other and smiled. "Well, we decided to make a model of the solar system." "Oh, but we can't see it," said Vice Principal Luna. "Well, we normally what we had normally do, and like the others had, but we decided to make a little bit more um, different approach," said Twilight. "Yeah, because we know that if we made a solar system model, and as the others, like if there's some others had done, we wouldn't get much. We probably wouldn't even get much a good grade or anything. I mean, that was average, so we thought maybe do this a little bit more advanced form of the solar system. Are you ready?" Twilight nodded, and she put on the type on her laptop, and suddenly the projector shoot up a beam and showed somehow a digital form of the solar system. Now, this is impressive work you do, but is this all? Said Celestia. No, Twilight? Yeah. So she pushed on the button, and suddenly the whole solar system slowly started moving. And both Principal Celestia and Vice Principal Luna looked at each other with a smile and a little bit shocked. And suddenly, other students around them and even at the tables had heard about this impressive model and they wanted to see it. And everyone were equally shocked and surprised how this would turn out. So you made this, what's it called? Hologram. It's a hologram representation of the solar system. It was actually Shooting Star's idea to make it possible to work. Even though that she has no experience of doing holograms, but we made it work. Even though there were some minor setbacks in the beginning, but we made it probably work. And here's the final result of how it turned out. Well, your work is unlike we have seen so far from the others contestants here, but still a good, amazing work you two have. Thanks, said Shooting Twilight. And later, Shooting Star and Twilight turned off their program and went all along to see the others. And shortly afterwards, both Celestia and Luna were going to announce the winner of this year's science. Even the other teachers were also have been partially judges and also been impressed of all their works, and especially for Twilight and Shooting Star. So, even though they were expected maybe to win, but and for this winner of this year's annual science fair of Capital High School will go to Twilight Sparkle and Shooting Star, said Vice Principal Luna. Everyone looked at him with a smile and cheered. Even Shooting Star was just like, "Oh, okay, I was not expecting that kind of look. But he was happy to then have to Eloise won this year. And they was even given an A plus. And Twilight. Not only she was given an A plus and was happy that project turned out perfectly well. She was impressed. And she said to Shooting Star after all this was over that she might start working on other hologram technologies or projects in the future. After all, this turned out to be a perfect, and she was inspired to want to do some other inspiration, some hologram, maybe more bigger size, maybe a size as a person, or maybe as an animal like an elephant. Shooting Star said that is gonna be an amazing work for certain of it. And he said if she needed any help or anything, he was always there to help her. And she smiled and nodded. And she said, "You are really a true friend. You know that, Shooting Star? You're the same thing here, Twilight. You are really a true friend. After all, we made it win, but I wasn't expecting to have this to be winning, but not only the winning though, but also again a true friend." And from that moment, their friendship actually grew stronger. And Shooting Star sometimes even helped Twilight with some projects from onwards, like some minor hologram projects or even some other scientific projects. But the bond that they shared for science only grew stronger between them. And for that, Shooting Star was happy to have Twilight as considering her as a very true friend. And even Twilight itself, she was happy to have Shooting Star as a true friend also. After all, they worked so hard on the project together and they were just both proud and happy that how they turned out. So this is how when Shooting Star and Twilight became true friends. The end.